2. Betty loves the Lord with all of her heart and lives her life to tell others about the awesome things that he has done for her. She has a new book coming out. It's called In God's Time. And it will be coming out soon, and I'm sure she'll probably elaborate a little more about that. Let's welcome Betty Hilton.
Good morning, ladies. Please continue to eat. I have a couple of things up. I do want to pray before we start. I know we prayed before we ate, but this is something I want to say to the Lord while we're all together. God, thank you for all the mothers that are here. They are such blessings to each and every child that they have. Lord, thank you for being with me today. I know that I don't have to worry about what I'm going to say because you're going to say it for me. And Lord, thank you for all the blessings you have given me. I cannot express to anyone how much I love you and how much you mean to me and what you have done in my life. It's absolute miracle after miracle. I praise your holy name, Jesus. Amen. Amen. Well, ladies, since it's Mother's Day, I'm going to talk about first my mother. Some things that my mother said to me when I was growing up. When I was about 12, my mother gave me a new Bible. And in the very back of it, she wrote something. And I opened it up and I was like, what's that? And I read it. And it said, just because it's true, you don't have to say it. So I went to it because I was a black and white kind of person. You know, if it's true, it's true. If it's not, it's not. And she told me, she says, Betty Jean, if what you're going to say is going to hurt somebody, then don't say it. And it changes the perspective of your life when you go through life thinking that. And she also told me, she says, always remember when you say something, think about how that person's going to think about what you said about them if you talk about people. She said, don't do that. It's hurtful. So I tried to live my life like that. The next thing she told me, I was pregnant with Scott. And his name is not Scott in the book. But we had went downtown to get the marriage license. And now you gotta understand, I was 16 and Roger was 17, almost 18. And we went to the courthouse and she had to take me and my brother went so she could sign for me to get married. And we went back home together, me and her and Joe, my brother, who is a retired minister. And we were riding down the road and we got a flat tire. And when we got the flat tire, Joe said, y'all just stay in the car, I'll fix it. And so we were sitting there, I wasn't saying much of anything, you know, I mean, this, you'll read about what my life was like, and I'll tell you some things. But she told me, she turned around and she was in the front seat with Joe and I was in the back. She turned around and she looked at me, she says, Betty, if you don't get married, she says, I want to send you to Kansas to stay with Wanda and the kids. That's my nephews and nieces. I helped raise them when I was only 12 when they were little, 10 and 12 and 13, but I babysat them all the time. They were like mine. And I didn't say anything. Well, you know, God speaks to you when you listen. And God told me, he says, she wants you to understand that if you do give this baby up for adoption and you don't get married, that you will have a life afterwards. Because, you know, to me, I thought I was going to die. I mean, I wanted to die if that's what I had to do. But, so, I mean, she had infinite wisdom. Now, the next one I'm gonna tell you is kind of cute. And it is, I was getting dressed to go out with my first husband. We were going to a club that my brothers hang out at, but we were going to dance. I didn't drink, and couldn't drink anyway, I was too young. Anyway, we were going out, and she came into my room, and I was getting dressed, and she says, "Where y'all going?" And I said, "To the RVA club." Like, okay. She said, "Is that place your brothers hang out at?" I said, "Yes, Mama, but we're going to dance." She said, "Well, I have one question I want to ask you." And I was like, "Yes, ma'am." She says, "If Jesus comes tonight, what kind of explanation are you going to have?" I have never walked into a place that sells alcohol that didn't cross my mind. I mean, the Holy Spirit brings it right here in front of my face. And I'm going to tell you what, it makes a difference in how you live your life. And I'm going to tell you what I told my children at Easter. And I sent them all, well, not all my children, but some of them. I told my grandchildren that I raised, I said, "Let me tell you something. I'm not going to be here the rest of your life. One of these days, I'm going to heaven. I'm going home." I says, "And I want you to remember, and I want you to put it in your heart, that from the day I get to heaven until eternity, I'm going to be watching and waiting for you. Because I want you there with me. I raised you in the church. I want you there." Because, and they've all given their hearts to God. They're gone astray, and I'm trying to slowly bring them back, because they were gifts from God, and I know they're gifts from God. Anyway, my mother told me in 1989 that my son, that was born in 1968, had come to her house, and that she didn't open the door, but she looked out the window in the door. She said, "He looks like you. He looks more like you than your children look like you." And I thought my children looked just like me. But boy, they don't, not when they stand up next to my son. Anyway, she told me, she said, "His name is Scott Anderson." Well, I want you to know I hired a private detective. I went looking. I looked everywhere. Nobody could find anything. My husband, and then later, I'll tell you about that. But anyway, I looked and looked, and obviously that wasn't him. That wasn't his name. But after I met him, and then I was thinking about it one day, I had this epiphany. The Lord told me that what this angel had said to my mother. Now, I have to tell you, she told my sister the first time he came in 1986. She didn't tell me because I was ill. I had a lot of problems growing up and raising my children, because I had a lot of depression because I didn't have Scott. So I told, I was thinking about it, and the Lord said, all that person said was, "I'm looking for Betty. My name is Scott, and I am her son, not Anderson." And she saw him. God brought him to, my mother had Alzheimer's after that, but he gave her that gift. She saw him before she died. And that is a blessing to me, because when we named how many grandchildren she had, his number was in that number. She had 19 grandchildren, and he was there with all the rest of them. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey and what God has done for me. First off, Roger and I met when we were 14. I was 14 and he was 16. And he used to come to my house because I couldn't date. I was 14. And I loved him from the minute I saw him. Just his mother introduced me to him, and I just fell in love right then and there. And we dated a long time, and then we got pregnant, which was unfortunate, but these things happen. I am the last person to throw a stone at any young woman that gets in trouble, because not only did I do it once, I did it twice. And I'll tell you about that too. But the thing about it is no child comes to this earth that wasn't meant to be here. It doesn't happen. I cry about the ones that don't make it, because there's a lot of them that people just get rid of. And that's not the answer. That's not what God wants. He doesn't send a baby for someone to destroy. But anyway, we got pregnant. I have 4 older brothers. I have a sister and 4 older brothers and a younger sister. And when the word got out that I was pregnant, I have 2 brothers. I have an older brother and a younger brother. The younger brother, I'll tell you, was a retired minister. The oldest one was career Army. He had gotten a girl pregnant when he was in Germany and married her. That was my sister-in-law and those nieces and nephews I told you about. We went, it was so hard. I mean, my mother came into the bathroom. I was getting dressed for a birthday party that we were having at our house. And she had went into my purse to get a pen to sign a card, and she said, I found this piece of paper in your purse. And it was the name of something that I thought you could take to make yourself a baby. But she found it. So she confronted me head on. She said, are you pregnant? I said, yes, ma'am, I think so. My mother aged 10 years in front of me. I will never forget it. She felt like my father had died when I was 13. He had committed suicide. And she felt like she was a failure as a mother, that she hadn't protected me. And that's not what it was. I was headstrong. I'm not a redhead for nothing. You know, I mean, that's just the way it was. But I will never forget the look on her face. And children don't realize they can say something or do something and it crushes you. And it's hard to deal with as a mother. And when I think about her face, I just want to weep sometimes because it hurts so bad. But anyway, we decided, Roger and I, through really hard circumstances, in places where I didn't want to live, but knew I had to because I had a baby coming. And we gave him up for adoption. We went our separate ways in completely different directions. He went in the Navy. I went back to high school. I marched myself up to the school and I said, I had the baby and I gave it up for adoption. Can I come back to school? And I was the first one in Berkeley County in South Carolina to be able to go back to school after having a baby. But I was 16 years old. What else was I going to do? I mean, I hadn't completed my education. So I went back to school. I finished my sophomore year because I was only a freshman when I got pregnant. And because I started to school late because my birthday's in November and November the 1st was the cutoff day and I had to wait a whole year. And they called my mother and said, can we put her in the 2nd grade because my mother had taught me to read and write. And my mother said, no, You can't. They said, well, she's ahead of everybody. She said, well, I would rather be ahead of everybody than be at the bottom of the totem pole. And so I stayed in the first grade. But anyway, after we gave the baby up for adoption, I never got to see him, never got to touch him, because back then, adoptions were closed and mothers had no part. And they put me to sleep to deliver the baby, so I wouldn't even know what was going on after I had been in labor for all day long for 12 hours. But anyway, my mother was with me when I was delivering Scott. I tried to pull my hair out. My mother was peeling my fingers out of my hair. I want to tell you, she was the greatest gift from God that He gave me, other than my children and my husband. I had two wonderful husbands. My first marriage was wonderful. And God gave me exactly what I needed. I had an abusive father. He beat us all. I mean, I sat at the dinner table one night and watched him throw something at my mother and bust her lip. He didn't hit her, but he threw something at her because she went to say something when he was going to talk. It's the way men were. I'm thankful men aren't raised like that anymore. But God gave me a man that was absolute wonderful father. He played with my children in the floor. He played with them in the yard. And he didn't discipline them. He let me do that. Because when he went to do it, I got this unbelievable knot in my stomach. Because I had seen abuse all my life. And when you live through that, I couldn't even deal with it with people in stores. Even now, if I'm in the grocery store and I see a daddy getting after a little one for doing something, I'll talk to him. I'll say, what are you doing? You better be good. You're going to get in trouble. Because I can't stand it. And then I have to leave as fast as I can because it just, it's an awful feeling. And people that have a home that has a good father are the luckiest people in the world. They really are. I mean, because some of them just don't, I don't know. I don't even understand. My mother had 7 kids. I asked her one time, I said, well, why did you stay married to him? She said, where was I going with 7 kids to feed? She said, it's not like it is now. There was no place else to go. We were told, you made your bed, you lie in it. She said, my brothers and sisters couldn't afford to take me in with my 7 kids. They could barely feed themselves. I mean, you know, that's just the way the world was. And Carl and I had a really good marriage. Carl dropped dead when he was 48 years old. He was a couple of days before his 49th birthday in the backyard at our home. And he was a happy-go-lucky guy. He was just fun. And that was exactly what I needed. And God knew it. After Carl died, I stayed a widow for a long, long time. In fact, Rodney, the pastor of our church in East Creek, the Nazarene church, his name's Dr. Rodney Lindsay, he told Roger one time, he said, you know, when you and Betty first started talking on the phone, he said, I was astonished. And Roger said, but why? He said, because Betty doesn't like men. And Roger said, oh? Rodney said, yeah, it had to be a certain one. and he's right. I mean, I have friends, I have brothers, I have brother-in-laws, but I have my space. And I don't let a lot of people in my space. That's just the way I feel. It's because of the way I was raised. But anyway, Roger and he called me up on Valentine's after his wife died in 2008. He didn't even know what day it was, and told me that he had lost his wife and that his mother was in the hospital or in a nursing home and that she was in bad shape. And I offered to go and help, but the sister-in-laws had it covered. And I didn't hear from him again for a long, long time. I called him on Easter. I called him on Mother's Day because his mother did pass away. I called him on the 4th of July just to see how he was. I had been that journey. I had done that journey. And I want to tell you what, when I have close friends and they lose a spouse or a child or a parent, I sit on my card every month because there's nothing lonelier than people forgetting about. I mean, casseroles go away and you never see nobody. I mean, my sisters they are always. I'm very, very close to my sisters. I love them both dearly. But, and my brothers were in and out too. They would call me up and say if you need anything or whatever. But other than that, people just kind of, they congregate when it's time, when you have a funeral, but then they go away. And you feel lost. So I'm appreciative of that fact. But I do, when I have a friend, my girlfriend that I have known since I was 6 years old had cancer a couple of years ago. And every month I sent her a card just to let her know that I was praying for her and that I loved her. Anyway, Roger called me in 2009, and he says, Betty, he says, what do you think about us looking for our son? I said, Roger, I said, I live in this little house with my daughter and her children, and sometimes my son and his daughter, and I live on disability. I said, I can do anything on the computer you want me to do. I can go anywhere in Charleston you want me to go, but I don't have the funds to do that again. He said, no, I'll take care of that. Well, I want to tell y'all what. This man is a godsend. He is so, I can't say, I think I want to go buy so-and-so. Because tomorrow he'll say, are we going to buy so-and-so? And I'm like, well, I was just thinking about it. Well, if you want it, let's go get it. So I have to be very, very careful. You know, it's just the way he is. He wants to give me everything. And it's not because he feels guilty. Roger loves me, and I know he loves me. Roger loved me his whole life, just like I loved him. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't take anything away from loving Carl and my first 2 children. In fact, I got pregnant with Cleo. That's my second oldest son, for the very reason that Carl had asked me to marry him, and I had told him I would. But after I had my baby, I went to see my girlfriend across the street. She'd had a baby 2 months before I had Scott. And I went to see her one day when I was getting ready to go back to high school, and she was hanging out diapers, and I was playing with the baby. And she looked me dead in the face and she said, what are you going to do if God won't let you have any more children because you gave yours away? I was devastated. And I know people were upset when I got pregnant with Cleo, but I wasn't upset, and Carl wasn't upset. We knew what I told him, I said, I don't know. I don't know. My mother was horrified. She said, what kind of example are you setting for your little sister? And then my red-headed self said, Snooky can live her own life. I'm not living her life. She doesn't have to copy me. But that was me. But anyway, I was married then. And I didn't go home for 2 weeks, and my mother called me and she said, bed, Jean? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, when you coming to see me? I said, this weekend. She says, bed, Jean? I said, yes, ma'am. She says, I love you. I said, I know, Mama. And I want to tell you what, having a loving mother is the most wonderful thing in the world. That's what Mother's Day is all about. The book, there's cards up here, there's business cards, there's bookmarks. The books will be here, and I'm going to ask Pastor Keith if I can do a book sale on the 21st. I'm not going to do it and even ask about next weekend because it's Mother's Day, and that's not appropriate. Everybody has to take care of their mothers next weekend. We need to do everything we can for them, especially when they get up in age. Because I was my mother's caretaker when she got Alzheimer's. And it wasn't bad, but my mother was a smart woman. She ordered a book on Alzheimer's and she read it. And she told me, she says, I would rather die than lose my mind and my dignity. It's a horrifying disease. They asked me would I want to take a test to know if I had it or was going to have it or if I had the gene. And I said, absolutely not. I'll take what I get when I get it, but I don't want to know ahead of time. I put my life in the Lord's hands. The Lord will give me what He wants me to have. And I want to tell you what, when you put yourself in God's hands, He gives you miracles that are beyond comprehension. He gives you life that is beyond anything you could imagine or dream. Thank you very much for listening. And y'all have a blessed Mother's Day, all of you. And I want to say that on the bookmarks and the cards, my telephone number and my email is there. If there's anybody in your life that is a young girl that's gotten pregnant and doesn't know what to do, have her call me, have her email me. Anybody that needs it, that's given a child up for adoption, that wants to know how we found Scott, let us know. We'll be glad to answer any question we can. Y'all have a blessed Mother's Day, and thank you for listening. I've got a gift, and everybody's going to get a card. We're going to pull a name.
Okay. Let's get back here so they can hear us.
Okay.
You want to read it?
All right.
Oh, yeah.
It is Karen Letterman.
Karen Linderman.
Yeah.
You won the gift. Yes.
I never win anything.
Chrissy.
I'll go this way. I'm going to go right. No, I'm going. I think Mom went on.
I know you're.
What's that?
The protocol.
I'm so aware of There you go. Yeah. Right ahead.
We want to thank Betty again for speaking to us today and sharing her story, and we look forward to reading your book. It will be great. And there's a token of our love.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful.
Remember your flowers when you go home. Visit as long as you want to. Thank you.
You can take the pens that were on your plate too. Those are for you.
Yes.
And feel free to come take pictures. I'll take pictures for folks if you need me to.
Oh, yeah.
you.